Kia ora, hello, welcome, haere mai. To Up Groove and Beyond Music Aotearoa, I'm Noel Hayvice, the host and creator of this channel. Now, I put up me talking to camera just recently, and it was more about how I came to this, how I originally started the channel, and it took me a while to realise a few things about it before I started kind of really getting to grips with it and deciding what I'm going to do and what I'm going to do with it. So this video here, as I alluded to in the last one, is my journey, my whakapapa with music in my life, and going back chronologically as best as I can to when I was quite small and the early music that I was surrounded by and how it influenced me, and just how things came about right up to as far as I can get to the present day. So back in we're going to start back in 1964. Now, my sister, who's 7 years older than me, my sister Christine, she was a big music fan, and in fact, she, so much so that she started learning guitar when she was still at school, and she started up what was known then as fan clubs, which might sound bizarre to you modern people with the internet and all that. You never hear of such a thing. So back before the internet and all of that, the way people had followers for their music was someone would start a fan club, and so someone would, I don't think she got paid for any of this. I'm not sure. Maybe she got a few perks out of it. I haven't talked to her about that aspect, but they would run the fan club, and they would deal with all the correspondence and send out letters and stuff to, like, newsletters and stuff to the fans who were a member of it. I'm not sure if there were subscriptions or what you had to do to join. Anyway, she was president of two fan clubs. One was called the New Folk Fan Club. Now, the New Folk were in actual fact a folk type group, and one of Christine's friends from school was in it, and there were two women and a guy, and they actually had a couple of singles put out, which I can't think of the name of them right this moment, but she ran their fan club, and a little bit later, or around the same time, I can't remember which, she ran a club, fan club called for a group called, now let me see, I'm confusing the names here. Was it the Dark Ages or the Soul Agents? I think it was the Soul Agents. Now, one of the people in that group was lead singer Murray Grinley, who went on to become quite a very well-known music lead singer, and also a producer, and has been involved in music ever since, and he's still to this day he's doing stuff, either performing or producing other people. Anyway, before I get too off track, Christine would play a lot of music in her bedroom, and I had another bedroom down the other end of the house, and it wasn't a big house, and I would often hear this music, so I was influenced by her early music. And prior to perhaps the New Folk and the Soul Agents, I mean, she was just playing pop of the day. We're talking early to mid-60s here, so it's everything from Cliff Richards and the Shadows and Herman's Hermits, all of that sort of stuff, which I grew to like, because a lot of it was on the radio, but she would bring home singles and then later albums of stuff that I wouldn't necessarily hear on so that was my first exposure to music. And in 1964, getting back to that year, I'm pretty sure she first took me to a thing called a concert at a local high school of a New Zealand band, Ray Columbus and the Invaders. Wow, I mean, I would have been 6 or 7, which is pretty cool for her to take me that out. I mean, teenage girls, you know how it is. They don't want to take their little brothers along to something like that, to a music thing. But she did. And that kind of started me on the road, like to see a bit of live music and feel the vibe and the atmosphere. That was quite amazing to me. But what really topped it around the same year, or the year after, no, the same year, was I got to see the Beatles. So I would have been about 8 years old. Yep, the Beatles in Auckland Town Hall. Wow. Now, with all the screaming, my sister included, all standing on their seats because it was all seated, screaming and going, "Ah!" And PAs weren't that good in those days. It's pretty hard to hear the music, right? Or even see it, because they're all standing up, and here's me, just this little guy. I couldn't see much, but yeah, I could hear it. But the whole atmosphere was just electric, and of course I'd heard Beatles songs that Christine had been playing. She had a lot of the 45s, so I knew the music anyway. And that was just an electrifying kind of thing for me to experience that, and especially to see people reacting like this. I'd never seen anything quite like it, Beatlemania as they later called it. And then the following year, she also took me along to another international concert called the Rolling Stones. Yes, the Rolling Stones, ladies and gentlemen. I would have been 8. And along, also supporting the Stones, was Roy Orbison. Yep, the one and only. And a group called the New Beats. And I can't remember. They did have a hit. Something about some silly sort of cheesy thing, like about peanut butter. No more peanut butter, no more toast and jam. Excuse me, I'm not a singer, but I'm trying to think of that song. I can't remember how it goes, but anyway, exactly, that's what I can remember. And I think Ray Columbus may have also been the only New Zealand group also on that. Now that was amazing, especially for me. Roy Orbison, when he came on, I was familiar with some of his songs, but the atmosphere and the vibe he created was something really different. And then the Rolling Stones, who were a completely different kettle of fish from the Beatles. They seemed back then, they seemed kind of scruffier, although if you look back at it now, you probably think it isn't. But they had longer hair than the Beatles, and they appeared a little bit more, I don't know, I mean, I wouldn't have known the word juvenile back then, but they were a bit wilder, a bit more juvenile in that way than the Beatles. And that was an atmosphere. They created an atmosphere that I'd never seen anything quite like it. That was something else, and I was quite taken by that. So much so, I got my mum, who did a lot of knitting. She knitted jerseys and that. I got her to knit me this Rolling Stones. I've got a photo of it somewhere. I'll have to drag it out maybe for another time. And I had her knit. It was a blue jersey. I had her knit the Rolling Stones on the front of it. And I've got a photo of me. Said, well, I was crazy on the Stones. Possibly I was more crazy on them at the Beatles at the time, at that very young age. And in fact, later on, the first album I ever received, which I think was either a birthday or Christmas present, I think my sister bought it for me, or maybe she got my parents to buy it. I can't remember, but it was, and I can't remember the title of it, but it was a Rolling Stones kind of. It was one of their early hits compilations. I've forgotten the name of it. Anyway, somewhere down the track, it got borrowed. I can't remember if it was by my sister or my brother or whoever borrowed it, and it got lost. I never saw that album again. But not long after that, when I started earning pocket money, I can't remember how long later, did I have a paper run then? Or I was doing something and I was earning, maybe I was just doing chores around home. I earned a bit of my own pocket money, and I saved up, and I bought my first 45, my first record of any sort, and it was it was Off the Hook by the Rolling Stones. And on the flip side, because you could turn it over and there was a song on the other side, was Little Red Rooster. And boy, did I love that song, Little Red Rooster. It just, I was just infatuated with the Rolling Stones. I still love the Beatles, but the Rolling Stones did something for me. I don't know, I can't describe it, but they just somehow took over my world. And so that kind of became the music as a youngster. And, there were other things going on. Like, I wasn't a real big Elvis fan, but his movies were real big. So we'd all watch his movies. We'd go along. Christine would take me, or I think my dad was even into him, to see the Elvis movies, which I liked. And the music was cool because it was part of the movies, but I can't say that I ever became a big Elvis fan in the same way that I did perhaps for the Beatles, and definitely not the Rolling Stones. They were it for me. So if we move ahead a bit, I'm just trying to think what would have come next. What can trigger my memory here? What I do remember is that I went to a concert. This is jumping ahead a bit. So your teenage years, in my opinion, are your most, if you become a serious music lover or musician, if you have that passion, it always seems that often, unless you come to music a bit later, that your teenage years are the ones that kind of really set you up as your baseline, if you like. Though the music that influences you there a lot of it becomes music that stays with you for life. Yeah, sure, you go on to like other music and your tastes expand, hopefully, and change as you get older. But I think the music you get into in your teenage years, a lot of it, most of it, stays with you, and that becomes a lot of it becomes music that you never get tired of, like even into your later years, even though you might have expanded your horizons. That's my theory anyway. I've talked to people from different generations about this, and it often seems similar, that the music in your teenage years. One of the first bands I remember seeing live was the Hollies. Now, I was a big Hollies fan when I was younger. Their early hits, but I went and saw them in 1971. That was an outdoor concert at Western Springs, and I think Three Dog Night were also on the same bill. There probably was a third band, but I can't remember who that was. But by that, and although it was good, and Three Dog Night weren't bad, by that time my tastes had started to vary a bit. A little bit to do with my brother, Philip, my late brother, Philip, who ended up taking up guitar a bit more seriously than my sister did, and got an electric guitar, started jamming with mates, and then he eventually ended up in a few bands that ended up gigging. So he started bringing music home and buying albums, and so part of the stuff he was into was also influencing me. And one of the records I remember was Led Zeppelin. Two of their albums, the second album, Led Zeppelin 2, with the Whole Lot of Love on it, and then Led Zeppelin 4, that became quite a monumental album for me. And I managed to see Led Zeppelin, and I've got to remember what year this was. I might have to recheck on my book. I've got a book here that's a pretty cool book called Live Gigs That Rocked New Zealand, and I'm pretty sure I saw Led Zeppelin in it's either early 70s, I'm pretty sure it's early 70s, 71. Let's just skip ahead, see if I can find it. Yep, 72. So 1972, I would have been 16. And here it is from this book. Here's Led Zeppelin when they visited New Zealand. I think the only time they ever played here. 1972, you can see the date there. There's a couple of photos from it. So they played also at Western Springs. Now that concert, I was already into the band by then quite heavily, and that concert was incredible. Around that same time, or just before, I had seen Joe Cocker. Now I don't know if his gig was mentioned here. Let's have a look. I don't think it's in here. Maybe it was later than I thought. They haven't got every gig in here, of course, but he was also at Western Springs. Maybe it's 72. Oh yes, it is 72. So let's see. Yep, 72, October the 5th. Here we are, Joe Cocker. Joe Cocker, 1972. The thing I do remember about, one thing I do, it was good, I really loved it. I was into Joe Cocker quite a bit by then as well. One of the things I remember about it, though, was he was quite wasted on goodness knows what. Some people said he was drunk. I don't know. Might have been a mixture of substances. Who knows? He almost fell off the stage. He was so out of it, if you like. And I do remember that. I think I remember something happened and he almost lost his balance, but one of the roadies or somebody just sort of pulled him back or saw what was happening. And he finished the concert and it seemed okay. I mean, yeah, it was good. So that was another live concert. So but listening to music, aside from the live stuff, was also having a profound effect on me. And one of the biggest effects on me, and still to this day, was listening to Jimi Hendrix. And he had a profound effect on me, probably more than most musicians. So in might have been around the same year. I don't know. No, it would have been going back a bit. 69 or 70, let me see. Either late 60s, early 70s. Me and my good friend Peter from my school days, we used to, go into town when we were about 15, 16. We used to, and sometimes we were a bit sneaky about it. Like we'd tell our parents we were just going to each other's places, and we would hitchhike into the city, and we would go down. In those days, nightclubs weren't licensed. So the interesting thing about that was, because they weren't licensed, there wasn't an age restriction. You didn't have to be 18 to go in there, right? So we would go down into some of the nightclubs around town and we'd start seeing bands and stuff. But at the first time this kind of happened, we were in one of what they call a milk bar, they called them. They used to call them milk bars. And milk bars that, not sort of a little bit like a dairy, but they specialised in making lots of different milkshakes. And they used to have the old kind of small jukeboxes that would sit. There would be all these tables and you'd go and order your milkshake and you'd sit down at the table on your stool, and next to you would be these little jukeboxes and you'd flip them back and you'd put your money in and play what was ever in there. Well, we went in there and played a few songs. I can't remember what it was. As we were leaving, we walked out of the milk bar and we were just a few steps down the road and we heard this sound. And we both looked at each other and we thought, what is that? And what it was the beginning of Purple Haze, Jimi Hendrix's guitar. And we were just, wow, never heard anything like that before. We went back to find out what it was. We'd never heard this track. And that was the beginning of my infatuation and love of Jimi Hendrix and his music, right? Of course, he never came here, so I never got to see him live. Maybe on another video I'll go into more detail on that. I don't want this to be too long. It's easy for me to get sidetracked and derailed off into stuff. So I might come back and do a part 2 to this and fill in all the gaps. Anyway, let's just move on a bit. So Jimi Hendrix became a big I just loved everything. And I didn't actually have any albums of his at this stage. But my brother Philip, who belonged to this thing back then, I think it was called the World, I'm not sure if it was called the World Record Club. It was one of those things where you join it and every month they have a record of the month. And the record of the month that he got one time, there were 2. The first one was Jimi Hendrix's Smash Hits. So it was all of Hendrix's early hits off the first couple of albums, and a few other tracks that weren't on those albums went on to this album called Jimi Hendrix's Smash Hits. And so my brother would play that a lot. And so I started really getting into it. And when he wasn't home, I'd go and grab his album, or I'd go and listen to it in his room. Sometimes he didn't mind, sometimes he did. But anyway, and then a little time later, he got the album Band of Gypsys. Wow. When I heard that, my brother played it over and over, and that was just embedded in my brain. I just loved it. There was something very magical about it. I'd never heard anything like it before. And again, my love of Hendrix just